So, what I'm talking about here, if you've seen my live events before, you followed me on social media, you've probably seen me talking about stuff to do with sex, right? Don't worry, there's going to be sex here, okay? There's going to be juiciness, orgasms, pleasure, and so on over the next few days. But we're looking into this like on a much, much deeper level. Because sure, there's the generic kind of idea that sex is good for us, or even that perhaps like retaining your semen is like a positive thing to do. But what we're doing here is we're looking at the ancient science of Taoism and how we can actually like scientifically start tapping into this energy and take it into different parts of our body to actually be able to optimize how the body is working and how the body is functioning. So this is kind of high level stuff. It's not stuff that it's not necessarily stuff that's going to appeal to everybody, which is totally fine. And that's why I made it clear when you booked your seat here, right, that it's going to be something looking at it's more for people who are really like determined to kind of get somewhere in life, rather than people who are sort of perhaps just content with where they're at, because it also takes some amount of work. So what we're talking about here, is we're talking about upgrading. And we're talking about upgrading by literally like hacking into the energy field. And people often think that doing this kind of work, it has to involve suffering, pain, discomfort, and so on and so forth. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't involve discipline. It actually absolutely does involve discipline. Without discipline, you can't do it. Without determination, without a vision, you're not going to get there. You're not going to really be able to do it. But this is all about tapping into pleasure and tapping into our power via pleasure. It's a system that works. It works like again and again when people keep doing it. Obviously, there are ways you can do the practices where you won't get the results, which is why it's important to have like a facilitator to make sure you don't perhaps not get results or even damage yourself, because these are powerful exercises working with powerful energies that you need to respect, essentially, as well as obviously respecting the culture they come from and what they're all about, and the fact that this is really ancient knowledge and wisdom that's so many thousands of years old. And where we're living now, our society, which is so disconnected from our bodies, so disconnected from our pleasure, our sexuality, and our power, that we actually have these tools to be able to hack back into what is originally authentically us, and start to be able to shine into the world as if we really like shining our authentic self, our authentic brilliance out into the world by really like connecting with and being able to walk our destiny. So this is merging thousands of years of ancient science with modern day applications to hack the energy field and emerge with an enormous advantage. And it's a little bit like, people can think, oh, okay, that enormous advantage, am I being unfair? It's no different from going to the gym and working out and getting a stronger body. But what we're doing is we're working out on the energy field. It's just that not so many people know that this is actually possible to do. And I think that also people's understanding is kind of limited, unfortunately. So who is this for? Are you motivated and ambitious to get the most out of life? Have you had enough of excuses and you want to shine out above the crowd? Are you creative and want to become exceptional at what you do? Do you love sex, pleasure, and feeling good and want to look and feel great for great as the years progress? So, and just explaining a little bit about who I am, why I am talking to you about this, what is my past experience, and we're going to go a little bit more actually into my experience of how I got into this further along in the presentation. But just for starting now, my name is Jade Lotus, and I have studied and practiced Taoist sexual alchemy for years. Through this practice, I managed to blow the lid off of my anorgasmia and simultaneously cure chronic health problems, addictions, and start manifesting creativity and abundance. And I studied with the Taoist Grandmaster Mantak Chia as well as many other people that were trained by him or maybe not trained by him as well, and learned to practice and teach the ancient Taoist art of sexual transmutation. And I'm also a certified Tantra educator, and I've helped thousands of people to get in touch with their sexuality. So as I'm talking here, if you have any questions, do please put them in the chat. You could put it directly to me if you want it to be private, or if you're happy for other people to see what you're talking about, just put it into the chat. Okay, but if you don't mind, like, just keep like things like compliments and general comments out. Only just put it if it's like a specific question you want me to answer, because otherwise I'm checking there and just, you know, yeah, in the end we can do compliments and comments. So moving on, and this is me with Mantak Chia. If you don't know who he is, I definitely suggest check him out on YouTube, listen to him talking. This guy is absolutely phenomenal. Like, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be here having this conversation. I don't even know where I would be. He's studied in his younger years with 4 different Taoist masters, and has had the genius to put these ancient teachings into like a format that works really, really well for modern people to bring into their lives, that people can bring them into their lives even in a matter of months and completely transform their lives. And just to give like an example of how powerful these practices are, I have clients that have come to me with like addictions or you know, diagnosable mental health problems, and within literally weeks, like everything turned on their head. Even, for example, men with real issues like even approaching women, suddenly finding that women are flocking to them after literally just a few weeks. This is such powerful stuff, and it comes from ancient China. It comes from Taoism, and we're gifted to have this today, that we can have access and use it in so many different ways to influence and affect our lives and create the life of our dreams and what we really want. And this is, I believe, what is natural for humans to do. This is what people did in ancient times, but today we've lost the knowledge, and we've almost lost the idea that this is normal, and we're living like we're living in the fog with no access to just basic tools that we need to actually bring ourselves through life, bring us into happiness, and also be able to create and to manifest the life of our dreams. So day 1, and today we're talking about energy drains. Okay, energy drains are anything that can be stopping us from being fully inside of our energy. Now, looked at from the Taoist perspective, and I'm going to go more into this next week, essentially our bodies are actually alchemical chambers. So if you've ever seen images of acupuncture meridians, okay, this is kind of the idea that our bodies have certain energy centers, and they have certain meridians that basically move energy and transform energy. And essentially this is our, if you could kind of, if you are not muted, could you kindly mute? Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So one second, sorry. Okay, here we go. Okay, an energy drain is anything that stops us from reaching our potential. We all have them. We can call them thoughts, beliefs, and programs that limit us, often without us being aware of them. These initially show up in the energy realm, but then manifest into the physical as low energy levels, dis-ease, etc., etc. And when we're talking here about the energy realm, we're not actually talking about an abstract concept that comes from woo-woo or ancient esoteric things that are not very, you know, easy to prove. This is actually exists in quantum physics. So it's now being discovered that, for example, the space actually between atomic particles is way larger than the actual space of physical matter. And this is where things like feelings of emotion and sexual energy and so on exist, in this plane. And so this is what we're talking about. We're essentially talking about an ancient science of quantum physics, which allows people to basically be able to hack into their energy field and to be able to just fully take control of their bodies. So if you imagine, like, our bodies are more high-tech than the most high-tech spaceship that's ever been created. This is a fact. We're way more high-tech. They couldn't even come close to creating a human being the way they can create certain machines here. Yet we're driving them around as if we're in a golf cart, where we just have go, stop, and reverse, you know? And we don't even know what to do with these bodies. We don't understand how they work. So we're just so completely limited in what we do. And even if you have a lot of drive, you have a lot of ambition, you really see yourself going somewhere. If you aren't able to actually drive this machine, you're really like at a disadvantage. So they often then take on a life of their own as we start to identify with them. So we identify with what? And I did say at the beginning, this is for people who are really ready to look and move to the next level. Okay, if you're going to get offended by what I'm saying, I apologize. Maybe this isn't for you, but you know, I can speak from my own experience, right? Someone who's dyslexic, right? And to this day, I still struggle when I'm in yoga class and they're saying, do your left side, do your right leg, and so on and so forth. I don't know. I get all confused, right? You know, I also am quite high on the attention deficit disorder spectrum, or ADHD spectrum, right? I hear people saying, oh, I can't read a page of A4 because I've got dyslexia. Okay, right, yeah. You can identify with your dyslexia. You can identify with your complex post-traumatic stress disorder. It can become so much part of you that you're scared that if you actually liberate yourself from this thing, you know, what's going to happen? And it's not that these things aren't real things, you know, it's not that trauma isn't a real thing. Absolutely, it's a real thing. But when we're holding on to these energies, what happens is they actually become a part of our personality. And then the energy drain can then start to influence how you behave in ways that support its existence. So I think like a really great example, and something I've done that I feel like I'm able to talk about it as an example, is cannabis use, right? So most people who use cannabis, they don't see it as like a dangerous drug. They don't see it as a bad thing to do. Obviously, smoking it once in a while is one thing. A daily habit or an addiction to it, it's a different thing. But we tell ourselves, oh, but I need it for my anxiety, I need it for my insomnia, and so on and so forth. And eventually the cannabis is almost like taking control of the ship, you know. And just in various ways, this dynamic plays out. And what happens is you've lost your autonomy, you know. Now, whatever guys may think of billionaires, you know, if you look at some of the most rich billionaires in the world, that are the most famous, like people like Bill Gates and Elon Musk, these guys are on autism spectrum or Asperger's spectrum, you know, and they're not using that as an excuse not to go further in life. And this is what I'm talking about, that we can have, you know, whatever traumas we have as children, whatever difficulties we've had, we have this natural programming within our body that's always driving us towards what is essentially our destiny. And our destiny is to be brilliant, to be amazing, to be full of self-love, and that people look at us and feel inspired by us. This is every single person in the world has the ability to do this. But when we're sitting around and we're living in excuses, or we are just lost, we don't have the tools to do these things, we're not able to show up for ourselves, and more importantly, we're not able to show up for the rest of the world. So let's have a little think about what's draining us right now. Okay, so think about what is slowing you down in your life, and you can do it on your iPhone. You can write this, you know, in the notes on your iPhone. You can get a pen and paper. Sorry, maybe I should have told you to get something ready. Okay, let's just spend a few minutes and think about what is slowing you down in your life, you know. So maybe a thought that comes in the way and it stops you from being able to move forward and do what you want to do. You know, it can include, like, do you have low energy levels? Are you not sleeping properly? Do you have a dis-ease? Do you have thoughts and feelings that are stopping you from reaching your potential? So make a short list for yourself of 5 things that you want to get out of your energy field that will result in you being free to be you, to excel, and to prosper. Often these things are subtle, and I find many people can be in denial of things that to me are glaringly obvious. So sometimes I see in my clients, and only because of my work I've done on myself, the extensive studies I've done, the work I've done with clients, and sometimes you see people like literally grasping onto their pain like it's the only thing that that they sort of keeps them going in a sense, and creating this hard shell around themselves. And I've absolutely done this, myself as well, so which is why I can say this. And because, and we're going to go into this in a little bit, our whole society is built on repressing things. I mean, I love the example of anger, because especially when you talk to people who've done a lot of self-development, a lot of spiritual work and so on, and they'll be like, oh, I never feel angry. I've completely overcome that. What you probably mean is you've repressed your anger so well that you can't connect with it anymore, but it's still in there and it's still playing out in subtle ways. But even more important, and we're going to go into this, is blocking you from your creativity. The Taoists don't say that any particular feeling really is a wrong feeling. The sexual energy is not viewed the way we are taught to repress it. And the same with emotions like anger and so on. I would just say that there's an energy field of hatred, which is just a huge mix up of everything and stagnation. That's not a good energy that you want to tap into. And the other one is shame, and shame is literally pushing things down and repressing them. It's the act of repressing. So we can have shame about anything because we can repress everything, and that just shuts the whole body down. And that's really like the major problem when we are not being able to access our energy, that we've just pushed down and repressed all of this stuff. So often they are subtle, and I find many people can be oh yeah, we read this. Okay, this is because our culture is based on repression, and repression is based on shaming and denial. So I want to talk a bit about tough loving ourselves. And actually, like, part of my job is I have to tough love people sometimes, and I hate doing it, right? And it is like, I realize it's totally my ego that, like, I don't want to seem like a bad person who's telling this person something they don't want to hear. But recently I did tell something to one of my clients that I was like, oh, okay, I'm kind of smashing down this whole belief system she's had since God knows when, And when we had our group coaching session, she actually publicly thanked me. I felt like exaggerating a bit the way I had been so tough, but it really made me realize. And also, I suppose I myself, I really appreciate the people that are tough in my life, the people that call me out on my bullshit, the people that tell me when I'm wrong. Those are probably the people I pay the most, the people that are going to tell me when I'm wrong. And, without this sort of tough love we can give to ourselves, we can receive from others, we can give to others, and so on, we are not going to get very far. So one of the biggest drains is lack of self-love. By this I mean that programming not to prioritize ourselves and to give ourselves what we really need to become exceptional. The world is full of mediocre people because people are too afraid to stand up and shine in their brilliance. We are taught it's selfish to prioritize self, but in reality, when we put ourselves last, everyone suffers. There's something Mantak Chia, who I showed the picture of me with him earlier in one of his books, he talks about, because we view in Taoism, we view love as an energy, like an energy that lives inside of our hearts. And we work and we cultivate on this energy, working on growing self-love within ourselves. We don't try to grow love with other people, but what we do is we fill ourselves so much up with self-love. The heart fills, the body fills, and then the whole aura is filled up with love. And I'm sure like people who try to give out love, right? So this can be like an auntie that meddles, right? Or it can be like I think often political activist, is really like not based on self-love, and everybody just ends up going like, yuck, to whatever this cause is, because it's not coming from a place of love, and it is just repellent, So all these ways, when we're looking at other people, we're trying to change them, we're trying to this and that, the best thing, really, what Master Chia says, and I really agree, is put ourselves first in the most beautiful way, in the most selfish way as well. I'm going to be talking about this in a minute, right? So I grew up in a home where self-love was practically considered a sin. I was constantly taught to give, and the result was I was falling to pieces, and wanting to give too much. It's really, really destructive. And what ends up happening is we actually just come across to people in a way that is not well appreciated. It's not a loving energy we're putting across to people, and we just end up alienating people. And this again, this is I think I say here as well, this is like ego, the ego going, oh yeah, I'm such a good person, I put myself last, I put everyone else first, and so on and so forth, but it's not us shining in our brilliance and shining in our beauty and creativity and so on. It's just us breaking ourselves to pieces and thinking, oh well, at least I'm a martyr. So this played in with the fact that I was traumatized by a mother wound and did not have a good example of taking care of myself. And we grow up often with not a good example of how to self-care, how to self-love. Obviously, some people do have that good example, which is fantastic, but many people don't have that good example. And so self-loving can almost be like a painful thing, it can be associated with trauma, which is definitely something I experienced. So I spent years trying psychology, but to little avail. I was stuck in a cycle of trauma and pain that debilitated me. So it was called CPTSD, which probably there's people here that have been identified with this condition, and it's a name that's given to a complex of energy blockages that are caused by a lack of ability to process emotions, because our society does not teach us to process emotions. So we end up with a huge mess and tangle of unprocessed emotions inside of our bodies, which basically stops us from being able to live our life to the fullest and to just experience life in a good way. So I've always been ambitious, and I thank that drive and my vision for pulling me out of the doldrums and taking me into a real life that I can now enjoy. So let's look at how important it is to be selfish. So we are taught that being selfish is always a bad thing to do. Yet if we don't care for ourselves, how can we be present for other people? Ironically, the one thing that I deeply believed was entirely selfish and superfluous was the thing that saved my life and turned me from an exceptional person with health problems and addictions who could not complete her creativity to shine into the world to someone that would start to change thousands of lives. That selfish thing was that I didn't have orgasms, except that there was nothing wrong with this being my catalyst for change. In fact, there was something both natural and divine about the way our natural human yearning for pleasure has the ability to take us to our destiny. And our society takes sexuality and puts it into a box and basically tells us, it's separated off from the rest of us. It's not really relevant. It's not important. You shouldn't really be prioritizing your sexuality. And sure, in the way that we're taught it in our society, most people think sexuality is about, do you like men or women? Are you polyamorous or monogamous? Do you want this and that kink? That's what it's limited to for most people. That's just a teeny tiny little perspective of what sexuality is about, because sexuality is everything. In Tantra, it's referred to like a goddess, an energy called Shakti energy, which creates everything in the universe. Everything that is alive is permeated with Shakti energy, and the Shakti energy basically is what include in the sexual energy. It's a life force energy, and in Taoism we refer to it as Jing energy, and it's the energy we're created from. It's the energy that can sustain us when we know how to tap into this energy, and that's what I'm going to be going into a little bit more tomorrow. So when we start to look that pleasure is wholesome and it is healing, so we are taught that pleasure is superfluous, like business and pleasure, that the two can't kind of mix, According to the Taoist understanding, in reality, pleasure is a sign that energy is flowing properly and that all is well and functioning in harmony. In other words, sexual problems are a sign of a deep blockage right in the center of our energy system. Left ignored, these will shorten our lives and limit our ability to show up for ourselves. So I'm going a little bit more into that tomorrow, but just to kind of basically give an outline, if you're sitting there thinking, what is she talking about? You know, as I said, we are created out of an orgasm. And when we look at the Taoist system of the way that our body is an alchemical chamber that transmutes energy, the very basic energy, which we would say is in the base chakra in Tantra and yoga, or is in the perineum, we would call it, or the Hui Yin in Taoism, it is the sexual energy. And we all know that feeling between our legs, that feeling of the energy vibrating, right? That usually, what do we do when we feel it? We think, oh, that's not the time for that. We better push it back down. Because if that energy rises up the body, I'm going to turn into some raging pervert rapist, or I'm going to do something inappropriate, or something bad is going to happen if we allow that life force to rise up the body. In reality, when we look at people that, for example, are committing sexual offenses and so on, their energy is actually so stuck in their genitals that they have so much agitation of energy within their genitals that's unpleasant, that they literally push themselves to do things that actually are going to get them into a lot of trouble, because they're so desperate to clear this energy blockage out of their bodies. So, by the way, when I talk about pleasure, I'm talking about embodied pleasure. So embodied pleasure is like a nice feeling. Like if I stroke my arm here, I get a nice feeling. It's not me going, haha, I beat that person, or haha, I slept with 20 men last week, or something like that. This is a different kind of pleasure, because that's the pleasure of the ego. And I'm not saying you can't have pleasure with your ego, but when we're talking about the feeling of energy moving that is a pleasant feeling, we're talking about embodied pleasure. So a nice feeling within the body. It can be like a relaxed feeling, a warm feeling. It can take so many different forms, but essentially that's what it is. And when we look at like this alchemical chamber, and we look at how the sexual energy flows, naturally, when we experience sexual energy, which is almost all the time in a way, if we're healthy and that energy is flowing, right, the energy move up the body, and it moves up the body. And when it comes into our body, it starts to rejuvenate our body and rejuvenate our cells. I'm going to talk about this quite a bit on Thursday. This is very different from what we think of as sex or sexuality. So most people think like sexual energy is something that people project onto others. So is that person giving me chemistry? You know, is that person good in bed? Is that person giving me an orgasm? This is a very different approach to sexuality, where we really take it and we own it for ourselves. Of course, partners are great. Partners can be part of this. But number one, we need to own this ourselves, because if we don't own it ourselves, we cannot expect another person to give us what we aren't able to give ourselves. You know, if we aren't able, for example, as women, to know what gives us multiple orgasms, how can we expect a man to do that? You know, and vice versa as well. So all the varying level of women, for example, struggling to orgasm during sexual intercourse, men struggling to last in bed, which is quite a large statistic actually, that basically we are going to be able, we are looking here at people not being able to access their energy and not being able to experience that flow, and to basically get the benefits from this life-giving energy, which the Taoists actually refer to as a superfood for the soul. Because when it comes into the body, the first thing it does is start to rejuvenate the cells and the glands as well. But from there, we can start literally putting it into anything, turning it into anything, turning it into our vision, turning it into our creativity, turning it into abundance, manifesting with it, using it for spiritual purposes, literally connecting into the universe, activating our pineal gland is there, all these things and so much more. which is why they call it a superfood for the soul. So the voice, and this is what I realized, with my experience, the voice that tells us not to put ourselves first and to avoid pleasure is the voice of the ego. Because the ego knows emotions are, they're not so easily logically controlled, right? They're not controlled in the same way that the ego and the brain does control us. Sexual energy, at the same time, it has its own like magic to it. We can call these like yin forces. They have their own magic and their own intelligence. But the brain and the ego doesn't like that because they can't be controlled quite in the same way. And I do believe that this is why our society over the last several millennia have really started to demonize sexual energy, demonize emotional energies as well, which are incredible, incredible forces that can really, really help us. And I think it's a bit like, what we've got now is, it's imagine like, you have a Rottweiler and the Rottweiler is completely out of control and you're just hiding in one of the rooms of the house, even scared to go in your living room because you think your Rottweiler might bite you. And that's most people's relationship with emotions and sexual energy. Whereas if you train your Rottweiler, you tame your Rottweiler, you come into a relationship of harmony with your Rottweiler, probably not by kicking your Rottweiler, but by creating a relationship with it, getting to know it. You then have a servant. And this is what our emotions, and I'm talking every emotion, I'm talking the ones that you've been told are not good, the ones that you've been told are bad, are negative. These are some of the most important emotions for you to get in touch with, because when you're condemning parts of yourself, like your feelings of anger, your feelings of fear, your vulnerability, it can be your love as well. There's so many energies and so many powers that are actually very, very strong and very, very useful that you don't have access to. So anything we repress essentially is an energy drain. And in a minute, we're going to be coming up that little exercise I gave you at the beginning. Have you got your whatever way where you're writing down these 5 points that are your energy drains? Okay, and we're going to start looking into what we can do about them. So what we need to do here is tap into our true selves, because when we tap into our true selves, we are going into this programming and this alchemical system that basically is absolutely perfect, and it will take us to our destiny. It will take us to what is authentic for us to do, bearing in mind, what might be the perfect thing for you to do and me to do is probably not the same. And that's why we need these energies. We need this wisdom, and the wisdom often it's coming from actually within and inside of our DNA, to actually be able to have a kind of compass that will take us around the world and around our life. And emotions are part of this compass when we learn how to understand them and how to read them. So, sorry about one or two mistakes here. Your true self is who you originally were before you were educated, moralized, and indoctrinated. This is the way that we want to get to let you shine. And because society teaches us that certain aspects of ourselves are so bad that we need to repress, going from, for example, when a child is very young, around 3 or 4 years old, there's normally the first burst of hormones. The child will then touch the genitals just out of a sensation. It's not even anything that is like what we really know is masturbation. And usually they will be told off by an adult, meaning that they're then having this feeling they don't even really understand. And what they're doing is they're pushing the energy down, which then starts creating like a kind of a dissonance and a reaction and a feeling of frustration within the child. Often the child is sitting there in school and they're wiggling to try to get the energy moving up, and we tell them, don't wriggle, sit still in your chair. And then it's no wonder that I think a recent study found that 10% of porn users are actually under the age of 10 because of this irritation and buildup of sexual energy within the genitals. They don't know what to do, and they're actually getting onto using porn as young as 10 and even younger. And I will tell you, I speak to many people that are in their 30s, 40s that started using porn at a really young age, and it's completely just limited them in so many ways. And by the time they get to say their 40s, it's really causing like major problems in their life, if not before. And this is just the result of like bad education around how to use energy. I'm not even going to call it bad sex education. I'm going to call it bad education around how to use energy, because this is energy that in ancient times People knew you could pull this into your body, you could use it to heal your organs, you could use this to make something creative. In fact, in ancient China, people would teach their sons how to massage their own penises to keep their penises healthy. And not only would it keep the penis healthy, it would keep the whole body healthy, because there is reflexology zones within the penis. So what this work I'm talking about is about clearing away the murky energy around you, like clearing mud off of a window so we can see the beautiful view. And the murky energy is all this repressed feelings that we've been taught to repress within ourselves. We talk about being repressed by society, but we can only be repressed by society when society is getting us to repress ourselves. And when we stop this repression, that's how we can be ourselves, find our true authentic selves, and find freedom. So as long as you are living in authenticity, you will not be shining your brilliance. Your natural gifts will be lost to the world. Now, a lot of people use the word ego as if a person who's in their ego is somehow going to be this nasty, horrible person. Most of the time, a person in their ego is really, really nice and really lovely and really sweet, and they're like a people pleaser. You know, like how I said earlier about tough loving this client, and what I was wanting to do was just, keep on enabling her, right? But what I realized I needed to do was shine a light on this situation, which completely changed a lot of things. So this is what we're talking about. We're not talking about being a better person. We're talking about being authentically who we are. And I suppose we could say, even though in many ways I don't like to talk too much about spirituality and so on, I do think, when you look at how the body has these mechanisms to be able to transform and to change energy. So essentially taking our sexual energy, we're going into this a lot on Thursday, right? But taking the sexual energy into our belly, turning it into chi, bringing it up into our heart, turning it into shen, which is love, basically, then bringing it up into the brain and creating like energy, which is like enlightenment energy, which really gives us like the deep true spiritual experience and connection with all things. It's just incredible that our bodies work like this, and my experience, and I truly believe we all come into the world as perfect beings, but we lose our path, we lose our destiny, we lose sight of our destiny, we lose our vision. And so people are just walking around just lost, almost like zombies, just with no idea where they're really going. And even for the people that put in a lot of work and decide to do something without really understanding this whole dynamic and without seeing into this field of things, it's almost like you're really, really fighting a tough, hard battle, because when you actually start to be able to work with these tools, everything can become like a lot more quick, a lot more easy. You can start getting your results very, very quickly, instead of just going through months and then years and so on, just of unhappiness and unfulfillment. So, however, as long as you are full of the programs of society and other people, you will never be able to shine as your true self. So when you're behaving in the way you were taught to do, you might be a really nice person, you might be a really good person, but are you your authentic self? Now, obviously, people are going to say, oh my God, yeah, but if you're not, following this morality, like, controlling your sexual urges and controlling your anger, aren't you going to basically, go around being violent, be a nasty person? This is kind of the idea that we've been given by our society for centuries, generations, that if we're not somehow being controlled in this straitjacket, we're going to be a bad person, and that I guess as human beings that we are somehow intrinsically evil, which I really don't believe this. I don't believe this at all, not through my own experience, not through the experience of being a mother. And one of the things that really influenced me as well, which was even before I really got too much into Taoism, was reading a book called The Continuum Concept, which describes the way that children are raised in a certain tribe, which is called the Yaquana tribe in Venezuela. And essentially, this child psychologist called Jean Liedloff goes, and she ends up just by chance in this tribe, spending about 2.5 years there, observing the way children are not educated. They're not they're not punished. They're not told what to do. Like, she describes these crazy scenes of like little babies lying on top of a 2 meter drop, so like a 6 foot drop, just lying there. Nobody's getting concerned. Nobody's running over and grabbing them. Yet the children don't fall off the drop. She talks about mothers breastfeeding the baby while the baby is swinging a machete around, and the mum doesn't get cut, the baby doesn't get cut. You know, young children playing with knives. All these things were telling people what to do. She also mentions that in this time there, she never sees children arguing with each other. She doesn't see parents shouting at children. She doesn't see children being rude and shouting at the parent either, except that there's one family that had spent some time living in civilization in Caracas who were quite dysfunctional and exhibiting all these so-called civilized behaviors of strife and so on, and she even notices, like, for example, in the tribe, nobody knows what masturbation is. Nobody does it. People just pair bond as teenagers, go on to raise families. People will also, so the parents, the family of the families will have sex in the room with the family there. It's not a drama, that they're doing it. Yet these people, they don't have sexual harassment. They don't have infidelities. They don't have so many of the things we see as the result of not repressing their sexual energy when they're not, they don't have morality. They don't have morality around sex. And another interesting thing is she notices that even though these people don't have very much muscle, they have a kind of superhuman strength as well. And if you're maybe familiar with any tribal cultures from other parts of the world, you might be aware of these factors of what actually happens when we're not being moralized and indoctrinated. And this is also what is spoken about, for example, in the Tao Te Ching. It says, if I can remember exactly, I don't think I have the exact quote, but it says something on the lines of, when you have morality, this is like a lower state of being that basically, when you're actually living in harmony, you don't need morality. And when you have morality, it's like it lowers your vibration, basically, because it stops you from actually living correctly. And I'm sure that people here have experienced this and know about this. So moving on to understanding our programming. So programming is the beliefs that we are told to hold that creates a system of how you operate. So let's look at a few of these programs that are very, very common, but there's so many programs. Okay, so these include beliefs that sexual energy needs to be repressed for us to be good people, that if we're not pushing it down all the time, that somehow we're going to do some terrible thing. In reality, pushing this energy down doesn't just stop us from accessing our life force. It actually creates a lot of like frustration and sexual frustration. And I personally observe and believe that what we call misogyny, sexual harassment, and so on is caused because of this repression and because of the negative emotions that it causes to build up. The fact that we're constantly pushing down something that very naturally would rise up our bodies and actually feed us with all kinds of things that we need to be able to really operate on an optimum level. So the belief does in fact block us off from our most powerful source of multi-purpose energy. So this superfood for the soul. Now, by the way, if I'm talking about this and you're just thinking, what is she on about? This doesn't make any sense. Feel free to drop me a comment, either personally or in the group, because we're going to discuss this in a moment. So the belief that anger is bad and needs to be repressed is another one. I really work with my clients about getting them into a good relationship and in touch with their anger, because not only does this repression of anger cause rages, passive aggression, resentment, and lack of connection, it stifles your creativity and causes lethargy and fatigue. And when I work with my clients and I get them to get in touch with their anger, not only do they come over with like a real sense of like calmness, because suddenly this friction with a feeling that naturally is part of them is gone. They also find like their direction, their creativity, because the gift of anger is actually creativity in Chinese theory. So it also causes lethargy when we're pushing down this beautiful force that actually can rise up and really give us the momentum to do something very beautiful and creative when we connect with it with love. So this is a little bit like, if you see a kid crying, having a tantrum, whatever, hopefully your approach would be to pick up the child and give them love and hold them, not to scream at them or throw things at them and shout at them and hit them, which is the traditional way, right? And we can see how it's really highly problematic. So today, many people are taught that love is not safe. And I think the way that we're taught to repress love is a really, really massive, massive problem. And I mentioned porn earlier, and I'm going to go back to that again just now and say, like, porn is all based on lack of love, lack of self-love, removing love, which, yes, it's scary, right? Yeah, it's scary when we don't love ourselves. Because if we take this little tiny morsel of love we have and project it onto another person and give it to another person, when we are not backed up with a big reserve of self-love, we're in a really dangerous place. And if we don't love ourselves, how can we love other people? If we're taught not to love ourselves, how are we being taught to love other people? If we are not being given an example of love by our parents as a child, and this isn't saying that the parents intentionally set out to try to damage and hurt us, this is literally just saying that they're just behaving according to their programming and the programming that their parents gave them, and programming going back generations, and so on. But we here now have the chance to change this programming so that, for example, any children we have, and I do find when we work on our own programming that even the progress goes back through generations. So, for example, I never felt a connected love from my mother as a child, but I did notice at some point since I've been working on all of this that now when I talk to her, she seems like a completely different person who I can really connect with. And it's incredible to see that I've done this work on myself. It's affecting my daughter, of course, as easy to see, but it's actually going across into another continent and affecting this woman that gave birth to me as well, and actually healing her. Is such an incredible, incredible thing to see. So the dominant message in our society based on that we often don't experience appropriate parental love as children. This stops us connecting. It affects our ability to shine, to be magnetic, and dumbs down everything we do. And this was really shown to me by a friend who at some point she was telling me about something she'd been through. And she told me this a few years after it happened. And I didn't even remember it that much at the time, but I wasn't emotionally there for her at the time she was talking to me about this thing. And she told me years later, she said, it really hurt me that but she says, I also understand you went through a lot of trauma as a child and it affected your ability to be there for me. And I was like, oh my God, yeah. I thanked her so much for pointing out this blind spot to me, because literally, like, I grew up without this feeling of love. Not to say my parents were hateful people or wished any will on me, but they didn't know any better as well. And I grew up with this kind of, without this love, and because my mum hadn't been showing me how to maybe have a healthy relationship with emotions and vulnerability and so on, when it came to this kind of like being vulnerable with someone, it was all like really scary and really messed up. And I had to work around this for like really like a bunch of years to start actually being able to go, oh yeah, here I am, me, yeah, and who cares how goofy or weird or quirky or whatever anybody thinks. I'm just me shining my light into the world. Not everybody's gonna like that, but it's really cool and it's really fine. So this is what we're going to look into a little bit more tomorrow. We're going to look into the emotional world. So we're going to look at these diagrams, right? Maybe you've seen them before, maybe not. And here's coming to our key points. But before we do that, I want to get back here. Ooh, 20 people here. So nice to see everybody. So can you give me a 1 in the chat if you've put anything on your list? One thing on your list is fine. Right? And I want to work with a few of these, what's coming up. Okay? And you can put it into the chat so everybody can see it, or you can send it privately to me. Okay. What's going on? What do we want to work on? So let's see what I got here. Oh, flattery. Haha, I'm looking fabulous. Thank you. Oh, so yeah, I mean, these sessions should be allowed for all the kids, mandatory. The parents are present here. Yes, I mean, it's so important for kids to start to find out about these things. So beautiful. Thank you to everybody about what you've just shared. And let's have a look. I'm going to first look at something which totally has affected me. Okay. We're going to go more into this tomorrow, and we're going to look a little bit more at this emotional stuff tomorrow. But anxiety, fear, self-doubt. Now, when we start doing this work, and what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow is actually how we can basically understand that these emotions are vibrations coming out of our internal organs, right? And the reason they come out of the internal organs is that each of our internal organs has a drive, or we can call it a spirit. Okay. The most easy to understand is the heart makes us want to connect with other people, and it gives us the feeling of love. Okay. So when this is out of imbalance, one of the emotions we can get there is anxiety, right? You know how we feel that as a fluttering in our hearts. And this is different from, for example, fear, which is just, the tree's going to fall on me and I'm going to be dead in 3 seconds. Anxiety is much more to do with, oh, what is that person going to think of me? And self-doubt, again, we talk about that as coming from a different drive. Actually, interestingly enough, we say this is to do with the spleen, what we call the spleen, and the inability to actually be able to have balanced and centeredness. So it's a bit like you're standing on a rocky plane, and you're not being able to essentially find a place of balance where you're just like, oh, I'm comfortable here now. Everything's cool. Everything's good. Overactive, oversensitive bladder. And this very much relates to the kidneys. We're going to be talking about this tomorrow. It relates to the kidneys, the emotion of fear, but there's definitely also an element to do with also the sexual energy. So looking here at, okay, loss of competitive drive. And with all these things, right, it's about a balance, because if we are not, obviously we don't want to be just competing with everybody in a crazy mad way, which, trust me, I've done that in my life here. But on the other side, like healthy competitiveness and what's going on there. We're going to talk more about this tomorrow, but this is the anger thing coming in, because if we look at anger and the way it's understood in Chinese medicine, anger is about us actually being able to like create in the physical dimension. And it's an upward rise of energy that actually allows us to really have like momentum to do something. So when we're suffering with things like, it says here, feeling the body is getting weaker, and this can be through different drains, but repressed anger is often a big one in there, and repressed sexual energy. And there's absolutely a connection between the two, because the energy meridian of the liver, which is where the anger comes from, actually goes right through the sexual organs. So, for example, in Chinese medicine, we say repressed anger can lead to sexual problems, including males impotence, and in females, like problems with orgasm. And this is why I really, really work, because it's such a strong energy that when we're actually connected with it in a healthy way, we can then be able to basically utilize that power. Okay. Yeah, fear of not being able to cope, not being strong enough, right? This is so common. And the thing is, like, we don't know our own power, or we're even afraid of our own power, because we are so, so, so powerful. If even like a small amount of people actually really steps into their power, like the massive difference this can make in the world is enormous. But we're scared of our power, and we're scared thinking, oh my God, we won't be able to cope. Like a client recently that I was saying to her, you must get in touch with your anger. You're not going to, and people always ask me, well, what does that mean? Who do I need to get angry at? What do I need to smash? Who do I need to shout at? That's not what getting in touch with the anger is about, but it's understandable why people think that, and I said, no, it's just the pure feeling within yourself. It's not that you have to express something, but you need to really hold that energy within your body. Because if our body can't hold energy, if we're pushing everything down, including our anger, we're just going to be weak. We're just going to be drained, And I think she went off for a day or two. This is always happening with people about getting in touch with their anger. It's so beautiful to see how people come back like so much more assured of themselves once they've been through this process, which usually takes like a few weeks, but it's really incredible, amazing way to just actually be able to like stand in our power, have healthy boundaries, and have the creativity. So fear, no connection to my body, 9-to-5 job, I'm ready to move away from. People that do not serve my well-being, low vibe food, too much sugar, totally get that. And I think it's nice to have all that detail there, because I think that going back to that, all these things are interconnected. Everything's interconnected. Listen, when I started to do these exercises because I wanted to have an orgasm, and I wanted to give up my cannabis habit where I couldn't sleep without cannabis, right? But mainly because of my orgasm. It blew away these problems I never would have imagined were connected, like health problems, sleep problems, anxiety problems, and when we're not in the right place, we can also go to, as we say here, low vibe food, right? Okay, look, have a little bit of low vibe food. Yeah, we don't need to be all high vibe all the time, but it's all about balance. And if we're picking out on stuff that leaves us feeling bad, we don't have that relationship with the body where we know what our body needs or doesn't, and ultimately this is caused because we're not actually connected in there to who we are. And this thing about people that do not serve my well-being, and on various levels, right, people can easily be vampiric, right? And especially look, when we're just looking at this energy of excuses, I have this, I have that, I can't do this, I can't do that. It is like a vampiric energy. And when we get surrounded by people that are just in these vibes, I mean, there's been several points in my life where I've literally had to like cut so many people out. And I even found, like, as I was essentially like progressing and moving forward in life, certain people that were actually becoming like quite malicious to me, almost like trying to drag me back into the place I left, because they couldn't handle seeing me going somewhere. So I definitely think like the company we keep, if we're around people that are all the time, putting across like a perspective that is just not really, how can I say it? Yeah, it's not, it's not feeding our growth. Yeah, it needs to go. It needs to be cut out. Anything there, And here, insecurity, feeling not good enough, feeling rejected. And that's another thing. If all these natural feelings we have, we're just pushing down, and we're like, oh, I feel sexual, that's bad, push it down. Oh, I feel angry, bad, push it down. Oh, I feel vulnerable now, push that down. How can we have any confidence in what we are? Because everything that we are, we've repressed it, we've pushed it down. We said we shouldn't be this. We listened to the careers advisor in school who told us, oh, you should become this, you should do this, you should be this. Anything but let's be ourselves. And the rejection thing, yeah, it's big. I'm sensitive, I get it, yeah, but when we are resourcing within ourselves, the sting to a big part is taken away. And here, sleeping problems, stuck feeling in the body, lack of energy, problems in time management, worry in the mind. Again, it's all interconnected there. And when the energy is not doing the right thing, it's going to affect our sleep. you know, and we feel it. And if you're feeling that stuck feeling in your body, that's fantastic. At least you're aware of it. Most people go through life not even aware of that. And worry in the mind. So we say in Chinese medicine, worry comes from the stomach. And you know that feeling of indigestion of the stomach going, and the same in the brain, ding, 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 like a washing machine that's not, got stuck on one of its cycles, and we're just going round and round and round, and we're not moving forward, And I can't contact with my anger. And in Chinese medicine, we talk about excess of anger or lack of anger. We talk about this with all the emotions. So lack of anger is not a good thing, as well as basically, because when we have a lack of anger, we probably have like a lack of healthy boundaries. We probably have fatigue. We probably have inability to really like move forward on our path. And it's beautiful to see all the women commenting here as well. And I'm really, really passionate about everybody, doing this, and everybody sort of connecting into this. But especially, I love seeing women to stand in their power, because although men are amazing, men are wonderful, don't get me wrong, we're also at a point where there's a huge astrological shift going on in the world, which is basically putting the power, which has been in the hands of men, into the hands of women. Not that women are going to want to repress men or in any kind of way, but we as women, we need to stop these excuses. We need to stop blaming men for everything that's gone in the world, and also accept the way we gave up our power as part of it. There's times where I just see things going on, and I just think all it takes is 5 women to just stand up here, and this situation is going to end. And yet women don't, and they're scared. And I talk to many women who will actually tell me, well, I don't like what my husband is doing down there, but I'm scared to tell him because I'm scared that I'm going to hurt his feelings or upset his ego, or it's going to cause problems between us. Look, I totally get it. We're taught as women. I was taught as women, keep quiet, don't speak up, don't say what you feel. Everything, the men know everything, and so on, right? But as long as we're staying in this paradigm and we're holding on to this, and we're not actually saying, what do we want? We're letting people date rape us or rape us within marriages, and relationships, which is what's going on, that we're having sex we don't actually want. And when that's going on, how can we be standing in our power? And what women do is they then just go off of sex in the relationship, which doesn't help the relationship as well either. And obviously everybody needs to take responsibility. Men need to take responsibility, women need to take responsibility, but we're never getting the results we look for while we're staying in this place of basically just making excuses for what's going on. So I'm going to now stop the recording into before we stop the recording, one more thing. Everybody who's here, and this is so cool to see 20 people here, because this is kind of a new idea and I wasn't sure like how people were going to receive this. Okay, first of all, you are all invited to enter my giveaway. Okay, have you commented on the post on the Facebook group to enter the giveaway? Have you sent me you're going to send me an email, right? Okay, do you know how to do this? Did you receive the email? I'm just putting here in the chat. Oh, sorry. No, I need to send this to everybody. Okay. Here. And I also want to invite, if you're interested about what I do, if you're listening to this and you're getting really, really turned on by it, you're turned on by the idea of taking responsibility for your life, of basically, really properly being able to actually like hack your energy field and become an exceptional person, it doesn't matter, right, if you've been traumatized, it doesn't matter what you've been diagnosed as. I was at one point completely written off as a hopeless case by I think one of the top psychologists in London. But you know what is cool? Because then I discovered Taoism and I learned to heal myself. So I've just put a link in the chat there. You should see live.jadelotus and so on. Okay, if you want to have like a 15-minute consultation about working with me, Okay, find out what offers I have, and so on. Use that to book. Okay, if you're looking at a really, really low budget, it's totally cool, and I understand that people are on a low budget, or perhaps not in a place where they're feeling ready to invest in themselves, right? I do have an option where you can still work through this stuff. I'm going to just put that option here. So I have a membership, okay? So you can join my community, you can get regular coaching lessons, and you can get some amount of content. But obviously, if you're really like into this, you really want to go somewhere with this, you really want to change your life, okay? That then I would say, let's get on a call, let's have a chat. And also for people who are basically saying, you know, like you're feeling like really committed to this, you are just like, yes, I want to do this, right? Okay. I have a partial scholarship. I have a few partial scholarships available, right? But if you want to be considered for that, this is for like my a few of my coaching programs, like the more higher ticket ones. Okay, you need to click that live.jadelotus.co.uk and book a call with me in the next 7 days if you want to be considered for one of those scholarships. But this is really for people who are just like, yeah, I want to do this, I want to change my life, because obviously those are the people that is easiest for me to work with, that I prefer to work with, people who are all the way in, you know, rather than people that are hesitating as well. So I haven't stopped the recording. Oh yeah, now I want to stop the recording. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording.